So the first question will go to Mr. Morisi first. On Election Day, there will be a question on the ballot about early voting. Shall the Constitution of the state be amended to provide for early voting? Do you support the referendum? Why or why not? What other ways would you increase voter participation?
Well, thank you for the question, and thank you for being here. Frankly, I do not support that initiative on the ballot. We have had a fantastic voting system in Connecticut for my entire life, I'm pretty sure everyone's entire life. We never questioned our methods for voting. We already had a non-excused absentee ballot. The extended voting that is on the initiative for the ballot is talking about voting, not showing up to the polls for any reason. If you have to work and the polls open at 7 o'clock and you have a train at 7:45 and you get home at 5 o'clock, that'll be an excuse not to vote. You cannot have a functioning democracy and everyone have faith in voting if you have an unfettered system where you have ballots going around to everyone, you do not have the infrastructure and the towns do not have the money to support such a cause, and frankly, it's a waste of tax money. It's a waste of tax money. The way to get people out on the polls is to be vigilant, to get out, to educate, to offer access, to offer maybe more polling locations, flexible hours, more poll workers. We do not need to change a constitution, a system that completely works, with frankly something that the only reason you would want to do that has to be nefarious intentions. And to have confidence in an election, to have confidence in your voting system, we need to have simple same-day voting with paper ballots, and we cannot get too complicated on a system that should be simple.
Ms. Brinton.
Same question?
Same question.
All right. Well, I do agree with early voting. We're one of 4 states that doesn't allow it, between Alabama, Mississippi, and New Hampshire. It's very difficult for people to vote on one particular day. Those who have jobs, 24-hour jobs, it's difficult. But I don't want to stop there. Reform really starts at the ballot, and that is, we don't have open primaries. We're one of the very few states in the country that has not opened up its primary process. 42% of the people in the state of Connecticut do not affiliate, and they are excluded. We don't have term limits. We've got a lot of gerrymandering that goes on that basically predetermines a red or a blue district. And that basically excludes, in most cases, 45% to 49% of the voters. Their vote simply doesn't count if it's already been predetermined. We need open ballot access. As a minor party, the independent party, we don't have the same rules and privileges that the 2 major parties have. And it's why I'm here tonight. I was given the choice. I either had to endorse Bob or I had to endorse Dan as a minor party, or we would lose our position on the ballot and have to petition and start all over again with the 500 signatures, which basically puts minor parties at a disadvantage. So that is why I'm here tonight. Incumbents have a 95% chance of being reelected. Bob has a 95% chance of being reelected in his 18 years. So I'm not running against Bob, I'm running against the system. And if we really want democracy, we want to open it up to voters, we need either election reform, which does include early voting, but we need open primaries, or we need a third party where we can broker relationships between moderate Republicans and moderate Democrats. Thank you.
Mr. Duff.
Thank you, and thanks to the League for putting this together tonight and being back in person again. Yes, I support the constitutional amendment change for early voting. As was mentioned, we're one of only 4 states that does not allow early voting in the country. States have been doing this for decades with no problems. It increases voter access. Connecticut, as a matter of fact, has taken a lot of steps to increase voter participation, whether it's registering at Department of Motor Vehicles, same-day voting, same-day registration, same-day voting here at City Hall if you're not registered. We've tried to do everything we can to make sure that people have access and are able to vote. Our democracy is stronger when more people participate. When you don't participate, we have a weaker democracy. So we want to make sure that we encourage everybody to come out to vote, which is why I've supported the constitutional amendment for early voting and expanded absentee ballot voting as well. We're way behind the 8 ball on our absentee ballot voting as well. Most states allow absentee ballot voting. Some states don't even have polling locations. But here in Connecticut, we're hamstrung by the state constitution. So we need to kind of get with the times. We need to pass the amendment this year for early voting. We're going to continue to work on absentee ballot, expanded absentee ballot voting next year in the legislative session. It's difficult to change the state constitution. We've had to do it, vote on early voting, 2 different legislatures because of the way the Constitution mandates it, which is fine. The Republicans have stood in the way of that progress. But once we hopefully pass it this year, we still have to codify it into state law. So it's going to be like 6 or 8 years before that actually becomes a reality. That takes a long time, and I think the time is now to do it, and we need to give people more opportunity to vote.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone want to extend a rebut?
I would like to.
All right. Mr. Morisi first, Ms. Britton second.
Yes, all this talk about voting and participation in our democracy and the voting issue of the ballot, we all know in our hearts that there is no problem with our voting system. Do we need tweaks on our voting system? Yes. Do we need to have more informed voters and more education? Yes. But all this stuff is really just distracting from policies. We're talking about ballot lines. To me, usurping a democracy is when people are voting on October 1st before they even get to hear from candidates. And with all due respect to Mrs. Britton, we're in an election right now. We're in an inflection point where we have things that need to get done. We need action. We cannot be fighting for a party line. We need to be fighting for people who are going to go up to Hartford and hold career politicians accountable. Hartford has a leviathan on voting. They have a leviathan on power, and this election is about breaking that. And all this talk about democracy and voting ballot access is all just a distraction.
Ms. Brinton.
Well, it's so much of a distraction that you've got people defecting from the Democrat and the Republican parties across this country. 69% of the American public think our democracy is broken, and it's broken for a variety of reasons, because a good 45% are excluded from the primary process. Yes, we need early voting, and we need to encourage people to vote, but we make it difficult. But what folks don't even realize is that before the person even gets on the ballot, there's been a lot of stuff done. And I'll tell you the other thing that I feel is Secretary of State and Register of Voters, we're running an ROV. We have politicized Register of Voters. We're the only state in the country that has a guaranteed Republican and a Democrat Register of Voters. I believe it should be a nonpartisan position. I think the Secretary of State should be a nonpartisan position. It creates problems for red states and blue states. And so if we really want democracy and we want to move back to the middle and stop the division, we either need reform or a third party. Thank you very much.
That's time. Mr. Duff, do you want to say anything on this?
But just the fact that I think the question was pretty simple. Do you support or not support the constitutional amendment change on early voting? The answer I have is yes, we should be supporting that. There's maybe other things to work on, but the question that we should be talking to voters on is to whether or not to change the state constitution to allow for early voting. The answer is yes, because when we open up the ability for people to vote, we have a stronger democracy, and that's what we all want. Whether you're Democrat, Republican, unaffiliated, whatever you are, we want to make sure that people can participate, and that makes our democracy a stronger place. And that means you have better candidates, better participation, and a better government that serves you.
All right, thank you all. The next question will go to Ms. Brinton first. Affordable housing is a significant quality of life issue in our area. What solutions do you propose to expand affordable housing and ensure that all Connecticut's municipalities provide more affordable housing options?
Thank you, Jean. Thank you. Affordable housing, there's 2 ways you can define it. You can define it as market-based housing, where we have a lot of multifamily homes here in Norwalk that provide affordable rents, or you can have what is called government-defined affordable housing, which is deed restricted. What we in Norwalk have had a tremendous amount of experience with affordable housing. Some good, some bad. But one of the problems we've got with it is you can't talk about affordable housing without talking about tax credits and low-income housing tax credits. Up until about the 80s, the only way that the affordable housing was built, it was built through the government. Now it's built through the private sector. But the problem with the private sector is we're basically corporatizing housing, and we're funding it through your tax dollars. We have the POCO project. There was a meeting up there just now. The per unit cost for POCO was going to run $800,000 a unit. Sound Landings is a nice project development over on Water Street where we rebuilt Washington Village. That ran about $650,000, $700,000 a unit. You can buy a condominium in the private market in South Norwalk for $250,000. When affordable housing costs 3 times more to build, that's a problem. And it goes to developers who make contributions to political parties. In Connecticut, it's blue. In Texas, I'm sure it's red. But there's a real misnomer. We need affordable housing. But you've got to look at why does it cost so much? And the reason it costs so much is because they do these complicated financing deals with real estate investment trusts who make a lot of money off of it. There's no guarantee that it stays affordable. It drives up the rents in the surrounding areas, and it does not necessarily help the marketplace. So yes, we need affordable housing. I think it needs to be tweaked in terms of how we're doing it. It's a real misnomer. Thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Duff?
Thank you. Affordable housing is an issue that is extremely important to us here in the state of Connecticut as we look to continue to build and grow our economy. Affordable housing is an economic driver here in the state of Connecticut. We have people in Connecticut, students, who we want to have them stay in the state after they graduate. We need to provide affordable housing for them. We have people who are in the middle class, in the working class, who we want to make sure that if they work in a community, they can live in that community too. We have senior citizens who want to downsize, and we want them to stay in Connecticut too. So we have to make sure we have affordable housing. When I hear from businesses across our area, across the state, they talk about the fact that we need more housing for people, and we need to make sure we have affordable housing for people. And that is not just an issue that should impact Norwalk or Stamford or Bridgeport. Affordable housing is an issue that needs to be addressed in every single community, whether it's transit-oriented development. Every community needs to have a diverse housing stock. We need to have apartments, we need to have condominiums, we need to have multifamily housing. We have passed legislation that allows for what's called granny pods in people's yards. Accessory apartments I know Norwalk is working on as well. But every single community must build affordable housing if we're going to continue to grow jobs and grow our economy here in the state of Connecticut. But we have to do that. We've actually, one of the good things is that we have been building places like Soundview Landing and other places for affordable housing. We have the state gave a grant to the Marvin for over $3 million for renovations there. We have to do more, but it is an issue that affects and impacts and has a responsibility of every single community across the state of Connecticut.
Mr. Morisi?
First of all, we can all agree that we all need housing. Affordable housing is necessary for any community to survive, and we should have a social safety net for everybody. The problem here, the antithesis of the problem is Hartford's become our landlord. We're talking about reworking all these bills. 830G is the bill that is taking away local zoning control away from municipalities. This whole idea that adding population density to a place creates economic revival is actually insane. You need an economy to work from the inside out and have housing to go and to support it. I mean, personally, I'd rather give 150 homes to people with a pathway to ownership than $10 million to developers. All it is doing, it is taking the power away from the local people and the local neighborhoods to decide what is best for their people to be home. You want to talk about, economy and affordability. Those buildings down there, Sona Harborside, one bedroom is $2,500. There's no pathway for generational wealth there. You're renting, you're in a cycle of dependency, a cycle of Hartford going out, and frankly, that is not something that helps a community. What helps a community is a little bit of private property. And honestly, Mr. Duff, being the state Senate Majority Leader, also being a real estate agent, hawking 830G everywhere you go, having development, causing traffic problems, causing environmental problems, I think it's very inappropriate. It is very inappropriate to have a real estate agent working with developers on special projects without the say of the people of Norwalk. The people of Norwalk drive around and they know that there is a housing crisis, and the housing crisis has all been gone from 830G. So we need to rip it up and we need to start local and figure out our own housing problems, maybe with dwellings, maybe with renting rooms, and we need to fix this thing. But I believe that it's the communities that will support housing, not the landlord of Hartford.
All right, does anyone wish to rebut? No! Ladies and gentlemen, I said no, I meant no. All right, I also would like to remind those people who came in late before I ask for rebuttal on this question. If you've got a cell phone, turn it off. All right? I do not want to hear beeping when we're recording the candidates. I do not want to hear applause until the end of the third closing. Is this clear? All right. As a matter of fact, most of you should have enough sense to know that it takes time away from the debate. We're not here to hear you yet. We're here to hear you on November 8th. All right. Is there anyone who wishes to rebut on
Yes.
affordable housing?
Yes, I
All
do.
right, Ms. Brinton.
I appreciate Dan's passion on this, and I want to ask Senator Duff why it costs 3 times more to build this. But I want to point out a few things. Norwalk does have more than its share of affordable housing. We've got 13%, and most of our surrounding neighboring towns have got about 3%. I've lived in 4 states, and I've lived in 3 different countries. Housing in Connecticut's pretty extreme, to say the very least. I don't think Hartford should be dictating how we build. You know, in Connecticut it is, because quite frankly, not enough people in Norwalk vote anymore. So we're getting what we're getting because they know they can take over our city. But at the end of the day, I want to ask Senator Duff, why does, if we want affordable housing, and I don't like 830G, I think it was meant to try and suggest to the towns to open up some more multifamily. But I want to ask Senator Duff, why does it cost 3 times more to build on a per unit basis affordable housing than actually buying and building equity, as Mr. Marisi suggests, a 2-bedroom condo in South Norwalk?
Mr. Duff, do you wish to extend a rebut?
No.
All right. Mr. Marisi, do you wish to extend a rebut?
No, I'm all set.
All right, thank you. Next question goes to Mr. Duff first. What should the legislature do to reduce or at least hold the line on spending at the state level so that taxes don't get raised?
Thank you. Well, this past legislative session, we actually cut taxes by $600 million. It was the largest tax cut in the state of Connecticut's history. We have done a lot over the last few years to cut taxes. We have worked to cut spending as well. We have the lowest amount of state employees per capita since the 1950s. We've worked to have 3 different agreements with state employees that has reduced costs by billions and billions, probably over $40 billion. We have cut over $2 billion of discretionary spending, and we have worked to use more of our IT and technology to utilize that rather than replacing employees as they retire. So, for example, people can now get their driver's license online through the DMV. They can do lots of things now online rather than go into a branch office. And so all those types of things that we have done, whether it's discretionary spending, whether it is moving online, we have also worked to pay down our pension debt, which is going to give us another $400 million or so in our operating funds. So that has been extremely valuable because we've actuarially paid down our pension debt, our pensions for the last 12 years, and we have actually made 3 different payments to the tune of $5 or $6 billion to reduce our pensions, which will give us that $400 million in operating funds and breathing room in order to be able to cut taxes even more, or be able to use that funding in ways that helps our communities, like education or transportation or helping senior citizens.
All right, Mr. Marisi.
First of all, talking about the pension, that is completely false, okay? Our pension has been insolvent for the 48 out of the last 50 years. Since Mr. Duff has been in office, Connecticut has not recovered the jobs since the Obama recession, okay? We had no net private sector growth from 2017 to 2020. Connecticut ranks 43rd in the state to retire in, 49th in economic and doing business in. Frankly, what has been happening is going on since the legislature's been going on. They have added $1.2 billion in new taxes going on. We have onerous regulations. It's impossible to do business here. Uninsurance is going to pay 22% more, small business uninsurance. And the entire Treasury, Bob Duff was not elected to loot the Treasury. Since he's been in office, Connecticut people, they've been spending like drunken sailors. We are $62,000 in debt per person, over $100,000 per household. You cannot function a state having that kind of debt and liability. You cannot have that. Unless we get business back, we open up Norwalk back, he talked about ASML and all the tech. Those businesses are great, but they do not affect the blue-collar worker. Those are business that is importing an economic agenda from out of state, that is importing workers from out of state. We have degrees, 4-year degrees for state jobs that we have to do. There's so much burden to get done. Small businesses, why did you get rid of the SALT deduction? The property taxes are killing our small businesses right now. We need to, also another thing, we need to raise revenue in other ways other than property taxes. They keep going back to the same person, the same property owner in Connecticut, taxing them. And I know in the last debate, Bob Dust said he was going to try to get rid of the car tax. I don't know, I'm pretty sure everyone in here is still paying a car tax on a car that's paid off from 2002. It's insane. Connecticut is insolvent, and we need to fix this fiscal mess.
Ms. Brinton.
Thank you. Connecticut budget's about $20 billion, I guess. We spend about 10%, $2 billion on education cost sharing, where we dump $200 million in our biggest cities, except Norwalk, and we still have the largest achievement gap. We spend about $2 billion on transport and infrastructure. Do you know that we rank 50th in terms of our administration for our building of our roads and our bridges and stuff? We have the administration costs per lane are about $35,000 a mile here. It's about $5,000 in every other state, okay? We spend $6 billion, about 30% of our budget goes for pensions and health care for employees. Employees, and I don't want to begrudge state employees, but they earn about 30% more than the private sector. I don't know how we're going to ever get out of the mess we're in when the private sector is on the treadmill and they're having to pay for a state that is very generously compensated. In fact, Senator Duff this May just gave himself a raise. Bob's going to get another $12,000 next year, while the rest of us are struggling with inflation and our 401ks and our IRAs going down. He will enjoy retiree health benefits, he and his spouse. He will have a nice pension. The problem is that we have been very, very generous to those. We're creating two economies. We talk about the rich and the poor. The very, very rich, who I do believe needs to probably be taxed more, and the poor. But there's also two sets of employees in this state. Public sector workers, and I don't mean to take any offense. I love our police, I love our teachers, I love our firemen. But the reality is the economics just do not make sense. And when you've got housing costs and health insurance going up and utilities going up, we've got to look for efficiencies, and we are just the most inefficient state in terms of building schools, roads, or housing.
All right, that's time. Thank you. Does anyone wish to rebut on this? Mr. Duff?
Thank you. We actually have two different agreements with state employees to save over $40 billion over 20 years. Every single Republican voted against that. Now they say, oh, that's great. When they propose budgets, which they actually never do, they would say they actually took in those savings of things that they voted against. Right now, a state employee hired today does not have a pension. They have a hybrid of pension 401k. Their pay is actually, we're have a hard time actually finding state employees because the private sector is actually paying more than the public sector is right now. And so, you can demonize state employees. They work hard. They're out there in the snowstorms. The state police are out there working all the time. Our social workers are out there. Department of Children and Families are out there. I don't demonize them. I value them. I think they do good work, and I think we should pay them a fair wage. And they do get health care, and they do get a 401k, and I think that's what they get in the private sector as well. So I will not apologize for the hard work that our state employees do.
That's time. Mr. Morisi, do you want to say anything further on this?
Yeah, real quick. Maybe you have a problem with state employees because of vax mandates, but listen, people have lost 30% of their monetary wealth this year. 30%. And inflation is just a tax on the middle class. And Bob Duff voted for a diesel tax. Everything in Connecticut needs to be imported in by trucks. Where do you think that is going to go down to? That's going to go down to your grocery bill. People are going to be worried about heating homes. And the only solutions that the Democrats offer is to thankfully give you your own money that's being overtaxed back to you, to give you crumbs on the dollar while everyone is cash poor. Connecticut has become a subscription service under this economic Duff-Lamont administration. And the people are hurting and they can't do it anymore. We have the biggest exodus of people because of our economy, and it needs to end this election.
Ms. Brinton, anything further?
Yeah, I just want to ask Bob how he feels about getting a raise when, again, my retirement has gone down by 25, 30%. I'm 63 years old. I'm living off of my savings right now, and we've got inflation at 10, 11%. How do politicians continue to give themselves raises in this sort of an environment? I don't know.
All right, that's it for this question. The next question goes to Mr. Morisi first, and it's the flip side, spending, not saving. Do you believe that the state should be financially supporting social emotional learning in our school system?
I believe that children need all the social and emotional support that they can get. And the difference that I differ is that Harvard has no business doing that. Harvard has no business getting between the parent and the child and their social and emotional learning. The schools and the teachers do know what's best for their children. The problem that we've had, I think, and we had an exasperated mental health crisis, as a state we decided to keep kids out of school for 2 years, doing unquantifiable damage to their education, keeping them away from friends, and we cannot talk about social emotional learning without saying of what has got us to this dire strait going on right now. You have kids that are dejected, that can't learn, that can't read, that are having social, and we are offering SEL learning, and on the flip side, our K through 12 kids can't meet basic standards. They cannot meet basic graduating standards. And frankly, if you have a kid who cannot read Huckleberry Finn, to me that's more important than someone than having guidance counselors come in all the time, saturating their education. The parents and the teachers are the ones that need to support their students. We need communities around them. We need more programs. We need more tangible, instead of investing into more social workers, why don't we invest into programs, tangible programs, after school? We have a YMCA in the middle of Norwalk that is just shut down for no reason. What a,
You want to take that? There you go.
yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, we have a YMCA that's shut down. To me, that represents everything that's wrong with SEL. That's where you start. You need people and schools to rally around their students again. And that starts with getting them outside the classroom, getting the proper support, getting the right educational tools for them so they can be kids again, so they can learn again, and so they can become vibrant individuals again to contribute to our great schools and our great communities. Harvard has no business at the dinner table. End of story.
All right, Ms. Brinton.
Yes, we need, I spent 12 years teaching students 4th through 8th grade after-school writing programs, and just recently I've been helping some of those former students prepare their college entrance essays. And they're stressed. There's no doubt about it. COVID was incredibly damaging to these kids in terms of their isolation and their need for interaction with their fellow students. The problem is right now, we don't have enough money. And why? Because we're spending money on bricks and mortar. And on bricks and mortar that have been funded through, again, means that are now being investigated by the FBI and the state. Senator Duff, rather than getting us money for our school system that does have a high-need student population, that needs socio-emotional learning, that needs reading, writing, and arithmetic, I agree with Mr. Morisi. My mother was a school teacher. We have deviated so far from our basic education and preparing these children for a 21st century economy, a global economy. I'll tell you when they need socio-emotional learning is when they can't get a job, when they're too afraid to go off to college. And what we're doing right now, what Senator Duff has done, is he's suddenly found a couple $100 million for a Norwalk High School. Never mind the fact that we haven't paid off the debt from the renovation work at Norwalk High. And so, spending is also about making choices and priorities. And I think, quite frankly, I grew up in a school where it was more important about what went on in the school, not its shiny facilities. So yes, I do believe we need socio-emotional learning, but we seem to be spending money on construction, whether it's constructing schools, constructing affordable housing, or constructing bridges and roads that cost 2 or 3 times more than what they should be costing in the state of Connecticut. So if you really care about children, you need to start spending that money and bringing that money into the schools and socio-emotional learning and not bricks and mortar. Thank you.
Mr. Duff.
Thank you. Yes, of course we need social and emotional learning, and actually in our last session we worked very hard on a bipartisan basis to pass Senate Bill 1, Senate Bill 2, and House Bill 5001 that talked a lot about social emotional learning, mental health for our children, to finally put in place various steps to help children in some of the gaps that had been there. We had worked hard to make sure we got our schools back open again, to make sure our kids had the proper support that they needed. We knew that there was gaps in our communities, especially in our cities, so we put funds there as well, and then also establish school-based health centers in new places, and to help our children ensure that they had the services that they needed, especially as they came back from COVID and not having school for a time. So we need to do that, but of course we need to ensure that all of our children are successful, that we graduate kids who are ready for college or career, that we're preparing them in good buildings, that we're preparing them with proper funding, that we continue the fight to ensure that kids are prepared, especially in our cities, which is why I took the lead back in 2017 to rewrite the education cost-sharing formula, which is why this year I put in the state budget that Norwalk gets a 60% reimbursement rate for school construction. Some may think that for some particular reason a school that actually has Wi-Fi is a bad thing. I think having a school with a good Wi-Fi, a good library that's modern actually helps students succeed. That raises property values, that will save local taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. And I think that that's what the community wants. Outside of just a few people who keep talking about that not to have a need for new schools, the vast majority of people in this community have said, thank you, we do need new schools. We haven't built schools in 40 to 50 years, and the city couldn't afford to do it on its own. Thank you for rewriting the education cost-sharing formula that helps poverty, concentrated poverty, and English language learners.
I'm afraid that's time. Does anybody wish to extend a rebut?
Yes.
All right, Ms. Brinton.
Bob's been in Hartford for 18 years, and more than likely he's going back for another 2. The educational cost-sharing formula that he's been a part of since the lawsuit back in '06, where it was declared to be irrational and then reversed by a Supreme Court. It's not only Supreme Courts are problems no matter where you are, by a 4-3 decision. We're going to get over 10 years, $4 million. That equates to $347 a year per kid here in Norwalk, 11,500 students. You're not going to give any social emotional learning for that price tag. And suddenly we find $200 million for a high school. I'd love a new high school, Bob. You were for Fix It First before we ever started investing in our schools. And Mike Barbas, rest in peace, brought Cranberry and Jefferson to this city. You were out in front of it with a Fix It First. So don't suddenly start claiming you're for building schools. But the reality of the situation is, if we care about what goes inside a school or what it looks like on the outside, and I think we need to deal with the inside. Thank you.
All right, anything further?
Yep.
All right, Mr. Morrison?
I would just like to add that the money that we're spending, Connecticut spends, I believe it's $23,000 per student in Connecticut. $23,000 of your taxpayer money is going. And it is abhorrent that in Norwalk and across our district, we have students that cannot meet basic needs. If we're gonna spend money on SEL, the problem with Bob Duff High and Hartford and all this shared is it's taking away from the basic needs. The Board of Ed, the taxpayers in this community need to be the ones to allocate the resources where they're most needed. If there's a middle school that doesn't have running water, they need that money. We do not need fancy new concert halls that have nothing to do with learning. Property values can't come up if your schools can't produce winners, okay? Norwalk used to produce winners. We need to get back to producing the greatest academic environment we can for these students, and that is not infrastructure, not just infrastructure. That is all-encompassing, and we need to get back where the money follows the student again.
All right. Mr. Duff, do you want to say anything further on this?
Thank you. One of the best things we could do as a community is to educate our children to make sure they're successful going forward and that they're prepared for college or career, good jobs. We can grow our economy. Connecticut is a state where you need an educated workforce. In fact, we have the most educated workforce in the entire nation, the most productive workforce in the entire nation. That's why it's important that we in Norwalk, like other communities, have good new schools. New Haven, Hartford have new schools. Other communities have new schools. We should have that as well. Our education cost-sharing formula is in the 4th year of a 10-year phase-in. I would have done it in 5 years, but I had to make a compromise with Republicans during our bipartisan budget so that it had to be at 10 years because they were worried about their communities that were losing population going to be getting less dollars. So we had to make a compromise. Would I like to phase it in next year all at once? Absolutely, and I think we hopefully do that. The amount of money that Norwalk's going to get, saying that it's only going to be $4 million is untrue, because that was if you had kept the same amount of dollars in from the beginning, and
Okay.
it would have been more than that, and we still continue to put even more dollars in going forward.
I'm sorry, that's time. Remember, the rebuttals are only 1 minute. All right, the next question goes to Ms. Brinton first. What is your position on the right of privacy of the individual to make reproductive choices? Would you change Connecticut's safe harbor abortion rights law, and if so, how?
I'm a woman. Oh, sorry. I'm a woman. I support a woman's right to choose. It's been codified in this state. I consider it's unfortunate that this is what we're talking about, because it is not an issue in the state of Connecticut, and it's shocking to me that it's an issue in this country, and I do believe that most of the states are going to rectify it. You saw it corrected in Kansas, a red state. Women, there are more female voters in this country than there are men, and I believe that that will be rectified. You know, the issue in the state of Connecticut, and I drew everything I came up with when I was preparing for this debate, it was a triangle, and it was, we need to deal with housing, we need to deal with education, and we need to be able to have jobs, and that goes with infrastructure. And we also need healthcare, and the healthcare and the education are two things that we need to be able to have and not have it cost you a fortune in order to get ahead in life. And I kind of just view, like I said, I support a woman's right to choose. It's a non-issue. We need to be talking about the affordability in the state of Connecticut. Our utilities are going up, our water rates are going up. These are the issues. And it is frustrating to me that you know, and I appreciate the league, but I really feel that that's a disingenuous question, and it's a tactic by the incumbent party in this state to distract, okay? What do women care about? They care about their children, they care about their families, they care about putting food on the table. These are the issues that make Connecticut the most unaffordable state in the country, and you have to ask yourself why. We're a small state. I believe we've got a lot of corruption and a lot of, or call it cronyism. You can call it corruption, or you can call it cronyism. And part of that's because of single-party rule. I appreciate the passion that Mr. Morisi has, because he's a young man and he's seen his future squandered by a generation of some of us older folks. And I hear a wah, wah, wah out of Bob.
Sorry, time.
I just want to be in the middle.
Mr. Duff.
Thank you. Everybody should know that the right for a woman to make her own choices is not guaranteed in the state of Connecticut. We passed a law that codified Roe v. Wade, but it is only a law. It is not a constitutional right in the state of Connecticut. So you have people who want to talk about other things, and then they'll say, oh, the right is guaranteed. I'm not talking about it, we don't have to worry about it. That's not true. Because we've had over 30 different bills and amendments by my Republican colleagues who have filed to take away or modify a woman's right to choose just over the last few years. This is not new this year. Over the last few years, we've had over 30 attempts, bills or amendments, to take away a woman's or modify a woman's right to choose. So it's not settled. So that means that the Democrats have been the ones to fight back and beat back those bills and amendments. And so if people view this as an important issue for them, for their own personal decisions, for their choice, they know who they need to vote for. Because we're the ones who have been standing up for women and their reproductive freedoms. I mean, just look what we see on a national stage with Senator Lindsey Graham, who's looking to put a national abortion ban. And that's only the beginning for them. They're looking to do contraceptive bans, they're looking to reverse same-sex marriage. These things are important for people. These are issues that people talk about at the kitchen table. they are issues that people think and know will affect their families. And so I'm always going to be a fighter and stand up for women in their reproductive choices and their freedoms. I don't want to be like another state where we see children who have gotten pregnant because of incest, and they have to go to another state to get an abortion.
Okay,
Or
that's time.
terrible stories like that.
I'm afraid that's time also. Time.
Well, I'm glad Mr. Duff is talking about the senator from South Carolina, even though we're in Connecticut. Listen, abortion is codified here. It's not an issue here. I actually agree with Lisa. All it is a giant distraction. The Democrat Party, Senator Duff, Lamont, everything, they cannot run on any sort of rhetoric. Abortion needs to be safe, legal, and accessible. Okay, he's talking about being pro-choice and pro between a woman and a doctor unless it comes to a vaccine or a medical mandate. So apparently choice only goes one way with Mr. Duff. But the big issue here is what they're talking about. Again, it is a radical view. We have a settled consensus in Connecticut with our law, how we adhere to Roe v. Wade in our Connecticut Constitution. What they are talking about is something different. I believe in a woman's opportunity and a woman's right, but we need to have a conversation. You say you believe in democracy. It is now up to the states. The people can decide what we want to do. The law is settled. When does a choice become a baby? What they are talking about is codifying abortion without limits. Is it 12 weeks? Is it 13 weeks? Is it 14 weeks? Is it 15 weeks? Is it 16 weeks? When does it become? That's a conversation that people should have and people should be allowed to vote on. Okay, this whole idea that he's protecting women as a man, talking about that is ridiculous. Who is the arbiter of it? And no one wants to talk about the mental anguish, the economic causes that go behind everything that is abortion. We do not talk about it. Why hasn't we come to a point in society where abortion is such a contentious issue? Okay, it all comes down because the Democrat Party, all they want to do is they want to destroy the family and destroy the basic moral tenets that hold up our community. And women deserve to have abortion accessible, but this point in Connecticut is truly a waste of time when people can't afford baby.
That's time. Is anybody going to want to rebut on? All right, Ms. Brinton.
I love being told by a man that what he's doing for my reproductive health. I love it.
Yo!
Sorry, don't do that. Yeah, don't do that, guys. No, I mean, it is so disingenuous. Why do women get into this situation in the first place? It's usually financial. They've been abandoned. And so, again, the issue is to talk about this and to hear this disingenuous conversation about how Bob's protecting my right to choose is incredibly infuriating and frustrating. What I don't have a choice on is the affordability in this state. My kids going to college, affording health care. You want to talk about abortions? Let's talk about health care and women's accessibility to abortion. Insurance rates are going up by double digits. Bob's aren't. Bob's got insurance through the state. Okay, it's a real different set of rules. And so, like I said, I am frustrated that we are using this as a conversation here in Connecticut because I think we need to be talking about the economy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Duff, do you want to say anything on this?
Thank you. People make statements about people's personal lives sometimes that aren't always accurate, so be sure what you're saying, Lisa. But I've been the only candidate endorsed by the Planned Parenthood, and I'm proud of that. I've said that women should have the right to make decisions between themselves and their doctors, and it's not up to government to get in the way of that decision. I don't want to see us become Florida. I don't want to see us become Texas. I don't want to see us become other states where it limits a person's right to choose what is best for them. And nor do I want to see it where children have to leave the state because they cannot get services, or a woman dies because the doctor is unsure what the right answer is from a medical perspective if a woman's life is in jeopardy. This is a serious question for this election this year. This is not something that is passé. It's not something that has been codified. It's not something that we shouldn't be talking about. This is a front and center issue for people's rights that have been rolled back from 50 years. And if you think that the Supreme Court is done on this issue, just wait till the other issues.
All right,
I'm proud to live in Connecticut,
Time.
and I'm proud to make sure that we always uphold the woman's right to choose.
That's time. Thank you. Mr.
People's
Mauricio, do you
rights
want
are
to say
women's
anything
rights.
further?
No, I mean, I just want to say, it's just, you know, abortion. It's a ridiculous thing when people are paying 3 times as more to heat their homes. It is a law that is settled in Connecticut. You want to talk about women's rights? Why don't we talk about the nurses that you fired because they couldn't get a shot, state employees? Those women's had rights too. You cannot talk about being pro-choice and everything without talking about the environment around it that goes around. And to me, it is just really, it's very disrespectful to the voters to try to scare women to get them to vote for you when there are an array of other issues that are going on directly down from Hartford. Abortion is not an issue. Women's health will always be supported.
Thank you all three. We now get to closing statements. By the luck of the draw, it looks like Mr. Duff is going to go first. Timer's 2 minutes.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about a few of the issues this evening that I know are so important to the people of Norwalk and Darien. To the folks who are in the audience tonight and those who are listening afterwards, I'd just like to say that I believe you all know me. You know my family and my record of public service, and public service is my passion. I love standing up for you. I'm proud to live in the state of Connecticut. When I ask people if they're proud to live in the state, hands go up because they're proud to live in a state that has choices and freedoms, and that where people are moving here like crazy. In fact, we've had over 50,000 people become permanent residents of the state of Connecticut. Our economy is growing. We have record new businesses that have started. Businesses are moving into the state. Our budget is good. We are in a surplus. We have a full rainy day fund, our savings account. Our bond ratings are up. We are paying down our debt. As a matter of fact, again, it's giving us extra operating room in our budgets. Funding and grants are coming into Norwalk like never before. We've had over $300 million come into the city of Norwalk over the last 2 years, whether it's for school funding, whether it's for city funding to keep property taxes down, whether it's for school construction, whether it's for the health department, for any number of places, infrastructure. Our funding is coming into the city like never before. I am very bullish, I'm very positive about the state of Connecticut. I'm very positive about our city in the town of Darien. I think there's a lot of potential. I still think we have a lot of work to do, which is why I'm running again and asking voters to re-elect me. So once again, if you believe in your heart that I have served you well, I humbly ask for your support. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Morisi.
Thank you. And first, obviously, thanks for the opportunity for being here. You know, I am extremely humbled and honored to try to earn your vote and to have this nomination. It is something I want to do and I'm passionate about. And, you know, coming in here tonight, I would just ask yourself one thing. If, you know, your life has been better off these last few years under this Duff and Lamont Hartford administration than it's not. When you filled up your car this morning, when you bought food today. I mean, just look around. The quality of life is hurting here in Connecticut. And to me, Bob Duff, he represents the past, all the policies and the platitudes for the last 20 years that really have led the people of District 25, Norwalk and Darien, nowhere. The progressivism that we've dealt with for the last 20 years has been nothing but regressivism. You know, we want real change, real progress, a real way of moving forward. We need to oust what hasn't been working, and this clearly hasn't been working. You know, I wouldn't be here if Bob Duff was doing his job. You know, I was born here. I came back here to try to start a life here. And I know I can represent Norwalk and Darien well because I am one of you. You know, I've made mistakes that have made me mature into a young man. And, you know, I've clocked into a job at midnight. You know, when most people are getting started, I've, you know, tried to help and support my family. You know, I've tried to help my mom. And there is no upward mobility anymore in Connecticut. It is a generational failure. And I believe our system is set up for common people to stand up to tyranny, whether it's on a local level or on a national level. And all I want to do is fight for the people of our community. I don't want to fight for a party. I want to fight for the people, only be accountable to them. And I promise that I will put the citizen back in citizen representation. And I will show up and be there for you guys and really do my best to break the Hartford monopoly. So thank you again, and thank you, Louise.
Thank you. Ms. Brinton.
I love his passion. I want to thank the league and all of you for coming out tonight. I've prepared my comments because I got 2 minutes. I'm an independent, and I always have been, those of you who know me. To the left of Mr. Marisi, to the right of Bob. According to a recent Quinnipiac poll, the majority of Americans think our democracy is broken. And Connecticut contributes. We're one of the few states that still has closed primaries that exclude 42% of the unaffiliated voters. Both parties fearmonger about abortion, all right? They fearmonger and promote false narratives to rile up the base and drown out reasonable discussion. Gerrymandering and winner-take-all discounts half the voters. Single-party rule dominates every single office in Norwalk but one at the state and local level, despite 45% voting differently. After 18 years, Senator Duff is the Hartford machine, doubling people and cars on Norwalk's 375-year-old streets. Water shortages and untreated sewage aren't by chance. And when per-unit construction costs for affordable housing are 3 times more than what you could buy a condo for, it begs a question. Pension debts double the national average. Our housing, electricity, health insurance, and infrastructure costs are the highest in the nation. These issues, coupled with overregulation, rank us at the bottom in terms of creating jobs. As for education, school construction takes precedent over reading, writing, and arithmetic. My reform campaign started 6 years ago. Discovering 3-minute public comments were useless, I used the ballot to take on disingenuous charter revision. Do you know Norwalk's one of only 3 towns that doesn't allow minority party representation on the Board of Ed or the council? I challenged the mayor and I got close, and last year I established the independent party again in Norwalk with 15 candidates. Without state election reform, we need independent candidates or coalitions with Republicans and Democrats to bring people back to the center.
Okay.
And that's why I'm asking for your vote tonight. Send a message to Bob, send a message to Hartford.
Thank you.
We need moderation. Thank you very much.
That's time. Thank you. Now.